Good afternoon, good evening, good night, be it wherever and wherever you are. Hello once again, my beloved and esteemed viewers, to August, where we have time for another vinyl update. Yes, once again, I'm still spending all of my hard-earned cash on plastic. Can't help myself, guys. So, without further ado, let's get right into things. So, first up off the bat, this is quite a fun little purchase for me. This was sold to me actually by a work colleague, of all things. He sold me a copy of Metallica's and Justice for All, which for my money is probably one of, if not the best of the first four big, records from Metallica. And this was sold to me by a chap called Will Hunter, who, as I say, I work with, in my professional life. And I found out that he himself is actually in a band. And, I figured to myself, I can't be sold a vinyl record by a work colleague who's in a band and not give him a quick shout out. So they're called Lithium, that's with a Y, little local band, lot of really good rockin' stuff going on here. And I'm not just saying this because I work with him and he'll beat me up if I don't say nice things, Will, you've got a real talent, fantastic guitar work, and I would really, really recommend that you guys check them out. I will leave a link to their EP from 2020 called Have It All down below. Really check them out, give them some love, show them some support, guys. A lot of fun. But yeah, Metallica's and Justice for All. Yeah, I mean, what else can I really say about Justice for All? It hasn't been said about 1,000 times by like everyone and their mum under the sun. The production sucks. We know. Jason Newsted got buried. We know. It's fine. It's not fine. But, I mean, look at his face. He's so disappointed. That's the face of a man who's, been buried in the mix by this man right here. Conspiracy theory, right? No, in all seriousness, it's still a wonderful record, and there are versions of And Justice for All out there where, I'm Justice for Jason and all that jazz, where the bass has been put back into the mix. And I love those versions, but I still have so much nostalgia for how it originally sounded, and this being like a 1988 pressing, it sounds exactly like I remember it, and it's still wonderful. It's still a great record. There's so many good songs on here, like obviously One, everybody knows One, and if you don't, you probably know it if you heard it. But when you've got things like Harvester of Sorrow, The Frayed Ends of Sanity, To Live Is To Die, what a tune. I mean, honestly, Metallica, when it comes to, like, being at their best, doesn't get much better than this. Everyone was like, oh, Puppets this, or Ride the Lightning this, and I'm just like, do you know what? I'm a Justice kind of guy. Always have been, probably always will. So, thank you once again, Will, for selling this to me. Much appreciated. It's been spun many times already. And guys, please do go check out Lithium. Really good band. Definitely worth your time. Next up on the list, I got a few of these records from a record fair a couple of weeks back now, and this one, obviously, it's Queen, it's Night at the Opera, let's go, baby. I've been trying to find a decent price copy of this one for a while, and like most places are selling it for like 30 or 40 pounds or something ridiculous like that, and I got this for like 12 quid. So, for Night at the Opera, £12. And this is more than Bohemian Rhapsody, okay? Yes, it's the big draw. Yes, it's the big song on the album. Blah, 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 blah. We know, we get it. It's Bohemian Rhapsody. What more do you want to say about it? But I really do love this album. Like, it's got so much creativity going on. And I mean, the Prophets song, where it's like this weird a cappella thing going on, that's just cool. And things like, where is it? Oh, God. Seaside Rendezvous. There we go. That's the one. That is a fun song, It's silly, it's daft, but it's really camp and kitsch and just fun. And that, to me, is Queen in a nutshell. There's so much just silliness on this album that I can't help but love it. But when you've got tracks like, You're My Best Friend, obviously, everybody knows that one. I suppose that's probably the other big song on this record. But I don't know. I mean, it's not my favourite Queen record, not by a long shot. I mean, for me, real talk, Sheer Heart Attack is hard to beat. But in terms of just having this as a pure classic, and it's definitely better than Day of the Races, let's be real here, which came after, obviously. But this is still a premium slice of Queen, and I'm really happy to have finally, got my hands on it for a decent price. Okay, coming up next, we have got the fabulous Voyage of the Acolyte by Steve Hackett. Now, I had actually never listened to this record before. I actually kind of... Oh, look, it's got an original price up here. Our price, £3. I paid a little tiny bit more than £3 for it, but I got this mostly to, like, make up a decent amount for an order I was putting on Discogs. I was like, I am not spending like £6 on delivery for a record, so I decided to, bulk it out a bit. But I heard this was really, really good. Never actually listened to it until now. Like, 2 days ago, I think I listened to this for the first time, and goodness me. Much like when I picked up Rick Wakeman's Six Wives of Henry VIII, you know, and that blew my mind. Voyage of the Acolyte has done similarly, but obviously this is for the, you know, for guitar music rather than keyboards and stuff like that. I was astonished. This is such a good album, and be it on me for, like, not having heard it before. Like, I was like, I feel ashamed having never listened to this before, and I'm just like, okay, that's it. I'm going back through Steve Hackett's back catalogue, I'm going to start listening to everything, I'm picking it all up, baby, because this blew my mind. I love this album. Right, coming up next. This is a weird one for me. Dire Straits Brothers in Arms. It's one of those, you know, ubiquitous album. Everybody's got a copy of Brothers in Arms at some point. But most people, I would imagine, probably got this on CD, because I always associate this album with CD. It feels like it was the killer app, you know, the album that was made to push CDs as a format, and I always associate it as such. So for me to have it on vinyl is kind of weird, you know. It's a great record. It is very, very good. There are some lyrics on here which haven't aged well. You know which ones I'm talking about. But we can maybe forgive Mr. Knopfler for that. Maybe, possibly. It's music from 40 years ago, guys. It's okay. Don't get too stressed about it. It's a great record, you know. There's Money for Nothing and Walk of Life are obviously the big hits on this. But the whole record actually slaps quite hard. It's really, really good. If you've never listened to it before, definitely check it out. Fantastic guitar work on here and some really great vocals. Right, moving on. We have got Universal Migrator, Part 1, The Dream Sequencer by Arion. Big fan of this album. I discovered this one at university, like obviously when I was getting into my whole Arion discovering prog metal phase. And what I like most about this record is how, I suppose, un-Arion-esque it actually is. It's possibly the least camp, least cheesy, most serious thing that he's done. I mean, everything on here has got a sort of a dirge-like atmospheric quality. It's less about the ripping keyboard and big guitar solos and riffs for days. It's about an atmosphere. When you start off with the first track of My House on Mars, moving into 2084, and then things like The Shooting Company of Captain Franz B. Koch, and things like Dragon on the Sea, First Man on Earth. You know, there's a lot of really kind of somber tracks on this album, man. The story of it is just so good. Obviously, this was then counteracted by Part 2 of the Universal Migrator, which was a lot more powerful, heavy metal, rah, sort of thing. This felt almost like the sort of the Pink Floydian qualities that Arion liked to explore at the time. It's really big, very spacey, atmospheric, and a wonderful, wonderful album that I will always hold very, very, very dear to myself, because this, you know, came to me at, like, formative years of my sort of discovery of progressive music, so very, very pleased to have a copy of this. Carrying on my collection, it's Abba. Self-titled. Yes, this was, I think, probably for me, their first genuinely brilliant record. It was, like, not quite as strong as some of the ones that came after it, sure, but it really showed off to me that this was a band who actually had more potential in them than just singles. I mean, obviously the hype stick is still on this one, including things like SOS, I do, and of course the big boy, Mamma Mia. No who's ever heard of that song, right? Never heard of it. Mamma Mia, what is that? It's a great record. It's really, really, really good and features a fantastic, very creative instrumental track in the form of Intermezzo number 1. Now, if you've never heard that song before, like it came on randomly, you probably never guess it was an Abba song, but it's so good. It is so good. And for me, it really showcases that they were a serious band, you know. They were really good at making actual songs, real music, rather than just pop factory hits or any of that nonsense. And the self-titled record for me was definitely the first example that they were to be taken seriously as a band. So we've nearly finished my Abba collection. I've got Waterloo and Ring Ring and Voyager, I think it is the latest one. I've got those 3 to go, but after that, I think I'm pretty much got everything from their discography, so we're nearly done. Ah, here we go. Much like Queen's A Night at the Opera, I've been trying to find a good price on this record for a while, and I'm very pleased to have once again only paid around £15 for it. It is Aqualung by Jethro Tull. My first exposure to the band, and still, I don't know actually, yeah. No, it's kind of tied with Thick as a Brick for me. It's tied. I think this one's a little bit maybe more accessible than Thick as a Brick, because obviously this is a bunch of songs rather than just one long song over the course of 2 sides. But it's a classic. It's a fantastic record. This is the, I believe this is an OG pressing, isn't it? I think it is. It's definitely not the Stephen Wilson remaster, I know that much. But, you know, it's a really good quality copy as well. It needed a bit of a scrub up, you know, when I got it, like a bit of a clean brush, you know, because it was a little bit grubby, but it's fine. It was grubby much like the lead character of himself, you know, but it's a wonderful, wonderful record. Absolutely peak Jethro Tull. Only better by Thick as a Brick for me, just because I prefer the concept of that record, you know, I just think it's kind of interesting. But if you never listened to Aqualung before, get in on it. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now here we go. The first classical record that I have actually put into my collection. Now, I grew up listening to a lot of classical music, but I never really knew what the hell it was, you know. It was a case of, this is that one that goes da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun, or whatever it might have been at the time. But this one I remember was the first classical album that I genuinely obsessed over and really took seriously. Now, this isn't the version of it that I had when I was a kid, because trying to find, like, specific versions of classical music is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, because it's been recorded and re-recorded 8,000 times. But it is Gustav Holst's The Planets Suite, which I don't like this cover as much as the cover that I remember when I was a kid, but it's basically the same. It sounds a teeny tiny bit different to the one that I remember, because obviously it's been recorded by a different orchestra and all that jazz, but it's still the same deal. Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, all the various different planets and what have you. And it's wonderful. It's such a piece of nostalgia for me. I do feel like most, you know, British kids and what have you have listened to at least some of this at some point, because there's that part on Jupiter, which is I Vow to Thee, My Country, which is played like Last Night at the Proms every frickin' year. So if you're a British kid, you've probably been exposed to it at least some point, but classical music, as far as this goes, this is part of my DNA as much as anything else, and I love it. I frequently revisit this, and it never fails to give me chills. You know, it's a wonderful, wonderful, like, suite of songs, and just check it out. If you've not listened to The Planets, please do check it out, because it's honestly wonderful, and definitely one of the best pieces of classical music ever recorded, in my opinion. Okay, next up, we have a little bit of a double whammy from the same guy, kind of, sort of. So we're going to put these two together at the same time. It's Mr. Wilson, and we've got Porcupine Tree's Fear of a Black Planet, and The Raven That Refused to Sing, and Other Stories. Now, both of these records came to me at different parts of my life, but they both had a really, really big impact on me. Fear of a Black Planet came out just as I was finishing university, and I was in that sort of spot or position where I was like, what do I do with my life next? I have no freaking clue. And this creepy sort of like blue lit kid's face became a real, like, central focus of my musical education at the time, and I will always swear by this record as being one of the greatest things that Porcupine Tree have ever done. Like, it's still not as good as Deadwing for me. Deadwing is the standard, but I think maybe this one's a tiny bit proggier, maybe a bit darker, more sinister, more angry, certainly in terms of its overall tone and mood. But that's honestly half the fun of this record, and it has the absolutely spectacular Anesthetize, which I will champion as Porcupine Tree's best overall song. Brilliant record, check it out if you haven't done. And then we move to Scary Faced Moon record, The Raven That Refused to Sing, and Other Stories. This is one that really made me think back and start reflecting more on 1970s prog. When this came out in 2012, I think it was. Good grief, that's a while ago now, isn't it? And I started looking at all the influences cited on this record and how much it really sort of channeled that sort of like King Crimson energy, especially on Open and Luminol. You know, that really does feel that sort of era of classic prog. And it made me start looking back, you know, looking back through the original masters, through the original artists that inspired the music on this. And as much as I love this album, and I will always love this album, it's ever so slightly still second fiddle to me for Hand Cannot Erase. So in a ways, Hand Cannot Erase is better than Raven, and Deadwing for me is better than Fear of a Blank Planet. But these are both extremely amazing records, and if you've never listened to either of them, then I'm extremely jealous of you, because you get to experience them all for yourself for the first time. Have a blast, I know you will. Now, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, based on the pinboard that is perpetually behind me, I'm a bit of a Disney nut, and that very much still extends to my love of music. Disney music has always been a big part of me, it always will be a big part of me, and none more so than Mary Poppins. Good lord, I love Mary Poppins. The film, the soundtrack, everything about Mary Poppins is wonderful. I even love the sequel, Mary Poppins Returns, because it's still really, really good. But this is a original cast soundtrack, mono, Walt Disney's Mary Poppins, Julie Andrews, Dick Van Dyke. This is, I think it's an original pressing, because there's nothing on here to indicate that it's a repress or anything like that, and all the dates are like 1960 whatever. And oh my goodness, it's... love it. It sounds incredible. It's a wonderful, wonderful record. There's not a lot I can really tell you about Mary Poppins' soundtrack that you probably don't already know, only that it's absolutely incredible. And things like, you know, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is an incredible tune. It absolutely slaps. It's still so good. Feed the Birds makes me cry my eyes out. Let's Go Fly a Kite fills me with joy. The whole soundtrack, the whole movie, the whole everything. I put this on more often than I should probably be admitting to, but it's one of my most played soundtracks of all time. Like, even before I had it on vinyl, and I just can't stop. I just keep spinning it. It's so good. It's absolutely wonderful, and just perfect in every way. Practically perfect in every way. Right, we've got a two-part whammy with this one. I am generally not really a live records person, you know. I don't generally listen to a lot of live recordings because, I don't know, I tend to feel that live music for me works better in the moment. You know, I prefer to be at the concert, to be able to be there in the moment and enjoy the experience as a whole. I tend to find that if you're listening to it afterwards on CD or vinyl or whatever format, that it loses something a little bit. You know, it's not the same as being there. That being said, there are some exceptions to the rule in terms of me wanting to listen to live records, because I feel they either bring something unique, interesting, or otherwise worthwhile to actually own them on a particular physical format. So I've got two today that I picked up, and that's Genesis' Seconds Out and Live at Red Rocks Amphitheatre by Opeth. Now, for me, these are both two of the best live records ever made. The Opeth one, purely for the fact that it is one of the best produced, best sounding live albums ever, to the point where I genuinely prefer a lot of the songs on here to the studio recordings that they're originally from, as well as it having a really fantastic, varied and interesting track list from basically all thoughts, moods and feelings of Opeth, both old and new. But it's just incredible. It's such a good record. I can't stop listening to it. I've listened to it about 4 or 5 times in the last few days whilst preparing for this video, just to remind myself how good the set list was. And oh my god, it's so good. It's absolutely incredible. And easily Opeth's best live album for me. And then you've got Seconds Out. Now, what can you say about Seconds Out? Ask any Genesis fan, which is better, Genesis Live or Seconds Out? Most of them will probably tell you Seconds Out. Now, I was at first a little bit skeptical because I'm obviously far more used to hearing Peter Gabriel on most of these songs, and I was thinking, how good is Mr. Collins going to be on the vocal duties? And honestly, in some ways, he's actually better, which does really go to show that Peter Gabriel's departure was not what caused the good ship Genesis to change course. I don't freaking know. I can't even try and pretend what changed their attitudes and their approach to whatever it was they were doing in music, but it certainly wasn't Peter Gabriel's departure. And this album, this live album, it's good. It's really, really good. If you want an experience of Genesis, you want to experience everything this band was capable of at the height of their powers just before the downfall, then you got to check this out, because there's nothing else like it. It's so incredible. Right, moving on again, we have another double whammy, and we are finally filling out my Elton John collection, because we have now picked up the old Self-Titled and Tumbleweed Connection, both of which are quite wonderful. Now, I don't think I really need to give much introduction to his Self-Titled album. It's kind of like, it's what launched his career, it's what made him famous, it's what made him Elton John. And you know, it's obviously things like, you know, Your Song, Take Me to the Pilot, and Border Song, and all that sort of good stuff. You know, it's all on there, it's all incredible, it's all super good. Millions of you have already listened to it, so I don't imagine there's many of you out there who've not listened to that record. But Tumbleweed Connection, on the other hand, I feel is his most underrated masterpiece, and possibly the least Elton John sounding Elton John record that ever existed. When you think of him, you think, you know, big, bombastic, over-the-top theatrics, but this record is so much nothing like that. This was a stripped-down Americana kind of really intimate-sounding album, so much like minimalist instrumentation on it, and so much in terms of heart and feeling more than it was about bombacity and theatricality, and it is so good. There is basically 0 hit singles on this album, and it came on reasonably early in his career. I believe this was either his third or fourth album. It might have been the one that followed the self-titled, because obviously you got Lonely Sky, which is, yeah. Then you had Elton John, and I think it was then Tumbleweed Connection. Don't quote me on that, I have to look it up. Terrible, terrible fan, I know. But this record is almost perfect. It's so good. And if you are looking for something a little bit more mature, a little bit more engaging and less expected from Elton John, then please do give this a listen to, because I think it is wonderful. A wonderful record that the annals of time have almost forgotten about, because it just doesn't have any of his big hits on it. But don't let that distract you. This is a fantastic album that really needs more love. So go and check it out, 100%. Okay, we're nearly at the end. Nearly at the end. And I couldn't resist this one, because obviously one of the greatest heavy metal vocalists of all time, it's Rainbow Rising with Ronald James Dio on the vocals. Now, there's not much I can really tell you about Dio that everybody doesn't already know, but Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, you know, obviously Deep Purple's Ritchie Blackmore, was one of the, for me, one of the best side projects of any band ever, and I will be hard-pressed to think of anything else which rocks more than Rainbow. And this particular record, Rainbow Rising, is easily my favourite record from them. If only for side 2 with Stargazer, baby. Now that's a tune. That is such a good song, and if you're only ever going to listen to one Rainbow track in your life, make it Stargazer, because it's going to knock your socks off. And if you like that track, you'll probably love the rest of the album as well, so definitely check this out if you've not heard it yet. Right, 2 more to go. This is a slightly well-loved sleeve, but, you know, whatever. It's Paul Simon's Graceland, with all the markings of a home that has, you know, you played it a lot, I guess, or stored it badly. But it's okay, because I cleaned up the actual disc, and it's beautiful and sounds wonderful. Now, some of you might remember this from my, you know, favourite non-prog or non-metal albums video that I did a while ago, and this, I ranked this in the top 5, I can't remember where I ranked it, you know, off the top of my head. But this is easily one of my favourite records of all time. It's absolutely superb. It is such a creative, interesting and engaging fusion and blend of different genres at a time when such a thing just wasn't really being done. And it brought that to the masses, because, you know, it's Paul Simon, for crying out loud, one of the biggest names in singer-songwriter history, and he brings out this fearless, experimental, sort of world music sounding record, and oh my god, it is so perfect. It's absolutely wonderful. Most people are going to know the song You Can Call Me Al from this, but it's so much more than just that song. Everything on it slaps, everything's a banger. Don't miss it. Please give it a listen to if you've never done so, and you'll hopefully enjoy it as much as I have done over the years. And last but by no means least whatsoever, something that normally lies a little bit outside my usual listening zone, because I'm not really big into the genre as a general rule, but I do love me a little bit of Sleep, and we do love a little bit of that, you know? Check it. Look at the album artwork going on here, man. It's so good. It's so good. For me, Sleep's debut was so much more accessible than, like, what is often considered their juggernaut of Dope Smoker. I've always found Dope Smoker an extremely difficult record to get into, because it's like an hour-long stoner metal record, you know, it's one track. Whereas, you know, this is just so much more straightforward. You know, it's a, you bog standard 1-2, it's a bunch of tracks, you know, it's just like a really normal sounding record, insofar as that, you know, its structuring is a bit more accessible. But something about this album really just speaks to me when the genre as a whole doesn't, you know. I love this album. The opening track of Dragonaut is one of my favourite songs, like, of the genre, and one of the most fun things to play on bass. It's relatively easy as well, you know, but it just sounds so cool. And there's something about this record, something about Sleep in general, which just really just opens up your third eye, whether or not you partake or not. This is still a seminal record. And if you've never listened to anything stoner rock or stoner metal before in your life, then you could do a hell of a lot worse than by starting with this one right here. And that is it, my esteemed audience. 18 records I have now purchased over the course since July's update. So that brings us to the conclusion of August. As I say, I am going to start winding things down a little bit, you know, because we've got well over 100 records in the collection now. But, you know, that's fine. I'm finding myself being pickier about what I pick up now, which is fine, and I really want to make more meaningful choices going forward. So expect there to be maybe bi-monthly updates for the vinyl collection and stuff like that now, because I don't think I'm going to be buying as much over the coming months, you know. I mean, I could be entirely wrong. I could come across a collection with 1,000 amazing records that I love so very, very much. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But as always, guys, until next time, thank you very, very much for watching, and keep your rhyme signatures extremely odd.